Hello and welcome to my presentation. Today I will be talking about witches in ancient times. So what are witches? Witches can be defined as a person, mainly a woman who claimed or was believed to practice sorcery or have magical powers. This is not to say that men did not also practice witchcraft, but male practitioners were considered learned apprentices and that for their scholarship they had to practice magic. Magic is defined as having the supernatural means or instruments available to compel others to do their work or control nature. This allows us to distinguish between classical goddesses and witches. Witches are oftentimes depicted as powerful icons, and the physical and societal boundaries of the natural order are challenged and broken by the powerful witches. So, were witches good or bad? There is no definitive answer to this, as some were viewed as being good by some people, while others were viewed as being evil. In the ancient world, there were many women who were very knowledgeable about herbs and potions, and they would sell some things like love potions. These women were also seen as healers and were very well respected by their community. The main depiction of witches is very much influenced by male misogyny. Many elite males referred to women as witches when in fact they were just wise women who would be sought out by the poor and other women for help. And then also in ancient Greece, they had a very patriarchal society, so this meant that women had to be basically subordinate to the men. And then this led to the men believing that if a woman did not listen to them, then they were capable of performing evil acts and therefore being a witch. Here are some of the earliest depictions of witches. So the first is the poem of Horace, which depicts two sorceresses with pale skin, long nails, and wild hair, burying a wolf's head under a full moon. They did this to conjure up the dead and make them do their bidding, so similar to a necromancer. Other depictions of witches date back to 928 BC, so to the time of Homer. And an example of a witch from Greek mythology is Lamia, who became a child-eating monster after her children were all killed by Hera and after she was forced to kill her own children. Another example of a witch is in Latin literature and is known as Erichtho, who is pictured on the left. She desecrated corpses and murdered people. She also terrorized the spirits of the dead by screaming down the throats of corpses on earth. Next, we have the differences between Roman and Greek witches. Greek witches were depicted as being young, beautiful, and fair maidens with honey voices, whereas Roman witches are often seen as being old, ugly, and frightening. They are also oftentimes seen with ragged clothes and an unkempt appearance that causes the people around them to be fearful and disgusted. Greek witches were oftentimes associated with animals and are driven by sexual attraction. For example, Circe, after sleeping with Odysseus, she uses magic to help him. And then another example is Medea, who helps Jason obtain the golden fleece because she's in love with him. And then Roman witches are seen as being animalistic and are driven by more selfish and evil means, such as like trying to get money. Here is the Roman and versus Greek witches continued. So Greek witches perform very simple methods for invocations, and their descriptions of their processes were very short and concise. Roman witches, their methods were quite elaborate and frightening, and their descriptions were very detailed. Greek witches were seen as more of a mythological figure from the past, so they seem less real and don't evoke as much fear as Roman witches do. And Roman witches were more contemporary, so they were seen as more dangerous and powerful since they could influence the real world. In ancient times, witches used curse tablets to curse other people. Curse tablets are the best evidence we have to prove the practice of magic from the 5th century BC to the 5th century BCE. Oftentimes, a jealous wife would use a curse tablet when they felt threatened by the female slaves that their husbands had. And then also on sheets of lead, one would write a message addressed to the gods to have them invoke punishment on those who they deem worthy of it. So what were curse tablets made of and how were they made? On a thin sheet of lead, a curse would be scratched into it using a stylus. People thought that lead would be the most effective material since it is cold and dull, and it would cause the victims to be bound dull and cold like the lead. The lead would then be heated slightly and folded or rolled to hide the writing. And sometimes they would also roll the lead around either herbs or hairs of animals or human, mainly the intended victim, and then this would cause the curse to become more potent. After folding the lead, they would also sometimes pierce it with a nail, which would pin down the target. Curse tablets were used by both ancient Romans and Greeks as a means of revenge. An example, like stated before, wives would feel threatened by their husbands' slave women and would use the tablets to curse them. Curses were used to seek mental or physical incapacitation, bodily harm, and sometimes even death. And they were used to curse thieves, rivals, or enemies in politics, and even sometimes over domestic disputes and affairs. The rolled up curse tablets would be thrown into a spring, pool, or newly dug grave, generally of someone who died violently or very young, and this ensures that the curse is delivered to the gods of the underworld. So there was generally a formula that had to be followed in order to make a curse tablet. First, they must invoke the name of the gods. Next, they describe the desired punishment and name the victim. And then finally, they have to explain why this person has received their rage or wrath. An example of a curse tablet is one that was found in the ancient city of Morgantina from 1000 BC. This tablet had been thrown into a pit in the sanctuary of the gods of the underworld, and it reads, Gaia, Hermes, gods of underworld, receive Venusta, slave of Rufus. So this just shows that someone named Venusta had been cursed, and they wanted the help of the gods of the underworld to curse them. Both the Romans and the Greeks had different versions and names for these curse tablets. The Greek curse tablets were called kata de moi and were generally used to inhibit their rivals. And then Roman curse tablets were called defixions and were used to completely obliterate their victims. And an example of a curse tablet was one that was found at the sacred springs at Bath, and it reads, invoking the aid of the goddess Nemesis against the thief of a cloak and booth found at the amphitheater. And this is shown on the right-hand side. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Hopefully you guys found it as interesting as I did.